Devastation Evokers use Fire Breathing and Arcane from the aspects to deal incredible damage, being one of the most unique classes we now have in World of Warcraft. I'm going to show you how to play them in a beginner-friendly and digestible format for both Mythic Plus and Raiding in Season 4. If we start off here with the stat priority, the main focus of your gear is going to be getting a higher eye level and therefore intellect. After that, this is the general secondary stat priority you would like to go with. However, I will say that it's not one size fits all, and you should be simulating your character to see which piece of gear is best. But, like I said, generally, if it's a higher eye level and therefore a higher amount of intellect, it's usually going to be an upgrade, and this as a beginner is what you should be focusing on. For the talent trees, I have put import strings below in the description for you. This on the left hand side is for raiding and mainly single target, whereas the one on the right is for Mythic Plus and more area of effect, multiple target builds. Not going to go through every individual talent, but we will be going through the important ones shortly. Before we do go through that though, and the main rotation, let's have a look at some of the other utility cooldowns and spells that we have available as Devastation Evokers. Number one being Tip the Scales. This makes your next empowered spell maximum power and instant. Well, what the hell do I mean by that? Evokers actually have something called empowered spells, and it's the first of its kind in World of Warcraft. Now, what we can do here, let's take our Fire Breath as an example. I can hold down number one, and you can see it's charging up from 1, 2, and 3 levels of empowerment. Another one we have here is Eternity Surge, and you can see here 1, 2, and level 3 of Empower, and you can see that does take a few seconds to charge up to the maximum. And therefore, when we use our Tip the Scales cooldown, that Empower spell is going to be instant and automatically cast at the maximum amount of Empower that we can. Then we have the Fury of the Aspects. This is Bloodlust if you're Horde, and Heroism if you are Alliance. If you are new to WoW and don't know what this is, it basically gives you and your party or raid a gargantuan amount of haste, speeding up your spellcasting for a good amount of time, and it is generally seen as one of the major cooldowns. Now, your raid leader or group leader may want to discuss when you should use this, but we do have it as an evoker. And lastly, we have a personal defensive Obsidian Scales, reducing damage taken by ourselves for 12 seconds, increasing our survivability. Now, looking at the utilities that we've got, first up at the top, we've got Quell, in this hideous mustard colour that I've chosen here. Please do forgive me on that one. This is our interrupt or kick. If you're not sure what the word kick means, it's just another word for interrupt, and this is how we're going to interrupt the enemy's spellcasting. This is really, really important. We're not just here to do damage, but also actually stopping our enemies from doing their abilities, and our interrupts is one way we can do that. Secondary, we have Blessing of the Bronze. This is a buff that we can put on our allies for an hour, meaning we can do it before combat. And if you're familiar with something like a mage or a priest, it is the same as the Fortitude or Intellect buff that they give, reducing the cooldown of the movement speed abilities all of our allies have. Going on to the bottom, speaking of movement speed, we have Hover and Zephyr. Hover increases your own movement speed, and you can actually cast all of your spells while moving when Hover is active. We then have Zephyr, reducing the damage that our party are going to take from area of effects, and applies a speed boost to them. And lastly, we have Expunge. This is going to cleanse poison effects from either us or our allies. And this is a great support spell that we can use to help out our fellow healers. But how, of course, does this all come together into the rotation? Well, here we are in game, and before we actually talk about that, I just want to go through a few things on my UI and the resources we have. Firstly, my UI is probably very different to yours. That is because I've custom made it using an add-on called Elv UI. And if you would like to get it yourself, you can support the channel at the same time and get a ton of written guides and resources, spreadsheets, etc., all on my Patreon in the description below. And you can import my entire UI with this, including Elv UI and the other add-ons that I have changed, so that you can get the complete minimalist experience that I have here. Another one is this weak aura in the center of the screen, and this is by Luxphos for Evokers. Again, that's in the description too. And this just shows all of your buffs, cooldowns, and resources all in one center area of the screen. You can see here we have 6 violet bars, and this is essence. We're naturally going to regenerate essence while we are playing, and some spells are going to use essence to cast. We do have a passive up here, Essence Burst. Your Living Flame has a 20% chance, and your Azure Strike has a 15% chance to make your next Disintegrate or Pyre cost no essence, and that can stack twice. Disintegrate and Pyre are our 2 essence spending skills, by the way. So just know that when we're using our Living Flame, sometimes our essence spending skills will be free, and you'll see that because they will light up and it'll be very obvious. Another thing to mention is our Mastery, Giant Killer, increasing the damage of your spells by up to X amount based on the current health of your target. Higher health targets take more damage. And that is just something that you should be aware of course, which is your Mastery, which is a stat we have. So let's see how we're going to put it all together into the rotation then, starting off with single target. So we've got our spells here, and the first one we have is one of our Empower spells. Remember, that's what we can use with Tip the Scales to make it instant at maximum Empower. Now, we are talking about single target to start with, remember. So with Fire Breath, you can see you inhale, stoking your inner flame, and release to exhale, burning enemies in a cone in front of you. Because we're only dealing with one target, and we're trying to do as much damage in a short amount of time as possible for DPS, damage per second, we actually only want to empower this at level 1. So you can basically just click it and let it go and empower that at level 1 when using single target. And what you can see here is on this spell, Living Flame, which sends a flickering flame towards your target, dealing damage. You can see that this is actually lit up after we've used our Fire Breath, and we can use that. Now, when we go into our talents, you'll see that we have the talent Leaping Flames. Fire Breath causes your next Living Flame to strike an additional target per Empower level. And therefore, if we fire this up at level 3 Empowerment, you can see on our weak aura here, we're going to get 3 stacks of Living Flame or Leaping Flame, where our Living Flame is then going to hit multiple targets. But because we're only talking about one target right now, we only want to empower it to level 1. We don't really care about hitting other targets because there isn't any. And we're going to use our Fire Breath on cooldown. It is only on a 30-second cooldown. Use it on cooldown. The next one we're going to use is Shattering Star. Exhale bolts of concentrated power from your mouth at 2 enemies for X amount of Spellfrost damage that cracks the target's defenses, increasing the damage they take from you by 20% for 4 seconds. So we're going to use that as our next one. And this one will grant Essence Burst. So if you're capped on Essence, like I am now, we don't want to use that because it's going to grant us Essence Burst, and therefore we're going to be maxed on it. So to clarify there, we can have 2 stacks of Essence Burst. You can see you get this little kind of animation come up on your screen, and this is 1 stack of Essence Burst. When we use it again, we'll then get a 2nd stack of Essence Burst. If we are capped on that, we don't want to use this spell because we'll be wasting our essence. But generally, you can use Shattering Star on cooldown. The next spell we have here is Disintegrate. Tear into the enemy with a blast of blue magic, inflicting Spellfrost damage over 2.3 seconds and slowing their movement speed. You can see here, we sort of channel this out of our mouth. And the actual tier set from this season does actually revolve around using Disintegrate. So when we use Disintegrate with the 2 set bonus from this season's tier set, we're actually going to add a debuff to our enemies called Obsidian Shards. And that's going to deal an amount of damage as volcanic damage over 8 seconds. And again, we're going to apply that with Disintegrate. And then when that buff is on our enemies, which we're going to apply with Disintegrate, our Empower spells, like Fire Breath, are actually then going to cause those shards to blaze with power and do more damage. Then we have our Eternity Surge. Focus your energies to release a salvo of pure magic, dealing X amount of Spellforce damage to an enemy. Damages additional enemies when empowered. Again, you can see that it's going to damage 2 enemies at 1 empower, 4 at 2, and 6 enemies at 3 empower. Because we're looking at single target and therefore normally raiding, again, we can empower this at level 1 because there aren't other enemies to hit. Then on our priority, we have Living Flame, and you'll notice that Living Flame and Disintegrate are on here twice. Living Flame sends a flicker of flame dealing damage, and at this point in the rotation, we're actually going to only use it dependent on our Burnout talent. Your Fire Breath has a 16% chance to cause your next Living Flame to be instant cast, and that can stack twice. So basically, when we use our Fire Breath, it's got a chance to make our next Living Flame instant. If it is not instant, so we don't have that proc up, then we're going to move straight on to our Disintegrate. You can see that this costs 3 essence, and we can use multiple of these. And we're going to use it if we have Essence Burst, And remember, Shattering Star, as you can see here, we've got 3 extra essence. That's our essence burst. And you can see it is proccing our disintegrate. And we can use that essence burst on the disintegrate here. And you can use a few of them at this point in the rotation to spend essence. So use that if you're capped on essence, if you're nearing the cap, etc. And then after that, we're just going to use Living Flame, even if it hasn't procced. And again, that can give you Essence Burst, which you can see here. We've now got Essence Burst again from our Living Flame. Then we have Azure Strike, and basically you can use this on the move because it's instant. If you are on the move, you can just do some instant damage rather than doing absolutely nothing while on the move. That's kind of like a filler spell, only for when you're moving around. And then lastly, we've got Dragon Rage, a cooldown on 2 minutes, erupting with Draconic Fury and exhaling pyres at enemies within 25 yards. For 18 seconds, 8 Essence Bursts' chance to occur is increased, and you gain the maximum benefit of your master regardless of the target's health. So we're going to use this on cooldown only if our Fire Breath and Eternity Surge, our 2 Empower spells, are ready to use, because we're then going to immediately want to use them. So just to go through the rotation again then, we're going to use our Fire Breath at Empower 1 on cooldown, and then we're going to use our Shattering Star, unless we're capped on Essence Burst. You can see here I've got 1 out of 2, so that's fine. And then we're going to use our Disintegrate to apply the Obsidian Scales to our enemy. We're going to use Eternity Surge on cooldown at 1 Empower as well. And here you can see from Burn Outlet, we've got an instant Living Flame. That's when we're going to use these. Now they're not instant, and we're going to use up our Essence. I would generally leave it at the 3 point. So we're just going to use 1 Disintegrate. After that, we can use our Living Flame, and we're not on the move, so we don't need to use our Azure Strike. And then again, you can see other stuff has come off cooldown. So again, we can use our Fire Breath off cooldown, use our Shattering Star, use our Disintegrate, and our Eternity Surge, using any instant Living Flames, as you can see we've got from Burnout here, and then using our Disintegrate. And you can start to see how the rotation is coming together here. So again, use your Fire Breath on cooldown, use your Shattering Star on cooldown unless you're going to cap on Essence Burst, use your Disintegrate to get the debuff on the enemy that you're going to get from your 4 set and 2 set, use Eternity Surge on cooldown, both again at Empower 1, and then use any instant Living Flames you can see when they proc, use your Disintegrate when it's proccing and to spend any essence, and then use Living Flame as a filler, and use your Azure Strike when you're on the move. Using Dragon Rage on cooldown, which is when you should use your Tip the Scales for your instant empowered Fire Breath, by the way, etc., etc. And that pretty much is the rotation. If we want to look at what we're going to change for AoE, it's really quite simple. We're going to, rather than Disintegrate, we're going to use our Pyre. Lob a ball of flame, dealing fire damage to the target and nearby enemies. So just use that instead of Disintegrate. So you can basically move that there instead of there for AoE. And then we have Deep Breath, another cooldown. Take a deep breath in. And you can see here you're going to fly across, take a deep breath in and fly across the target location, spewing molten cinders, dealing damage to enemies in your path. So therefore, basically AoE to everyone it hits. You can fully empower your Fire Breath at that point because of the Leaping Flames buff, remember, where your Living Flame will help multiple targets. And that's dependent on how much you empower your Fire Breath. So in AoE, basically empower this to full, and the same with Eternity Surge, depending on how many targets you need to hit. So if it's 6 targets, then you can obviously empower it to full. So basically in single target, empower everything to 1. In AoE, empower everything to maximum, depending if needed. And then you can use your Deep Breath in AoE and swap out Disintegrate for Pyre in AoE. And that is literally the only changes we're going to make. There's a few other little things here. Don't forget about Blessing of the Bronze. That's the hour-long buff we can put on our allies, remember. Don't forget Quell, your Interrupt. We do have Renewing Blaze. This is a 1-minute cooldown where the flames of life surround you. While the effect is active, 100% of damage you take is healed back. That's just another little cooldown I didn't mention earlier. And Source of Magic. Redirect your excess magic to a friendly healer for an hour when you cast an empowered spell, like your Fire Breath or your Eternity Surge. The healer will restore 0.25% of their maximum mana per empower level. And you can put this on 1 healer at a time. In Mythic Plus, put it on the healer. In Raid, discuss with your healers who you're going to put this on. But trust me, I main a healer. It is really, really useful and it will be appreciated. And that is it, guys. That is how you're going to play Devastation Evoker in Season 4 of Dragonflight. Again, if you need any more help, please do join our Discord, where we've got really, really nice, friendly community who are happy to help other beginners. And you can also join my Patreon to get my entire UI. You're going to unlock a VIP section in the Discord where you can ask me any questions, again, that you may need. Of course, you can do it in the comments as well. I always prioritize Patreons on any help they may need with classes and specs, etc. And if you're looking for other guides, whether that be for Evoker or other classes, you can click this playlist here for all of my PvE guides, which is all of them for Season 4. And I am also doing dungeon and PvP guides, so make sure to check out my channel for those as well.